Today, Matt Walsh Show, Jimmy Kimmel lied and defamed Charlie Kirk and his supporters, and now he's been kicked off the air. Of course, the left is treating this like a national tragedy, to them a far greater tragedy than the actual murder of an innocent man. We'll talk about that. Also, Nancy Mace moves to censure Ilhan Omar. The Muslim mayor of Dearborn tells a citizen that although he lives in the city, he isn't welcome there. It's funny because I feel exactly the same way about the mayor. We'll discuss all of that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Are you drowning in credit card and loan debt? Well, you're not alone, but here's something most people don't know. September is actually the best time to negotiate with your lenders. Why September? Well, credit card companies and lenders are doing year-end accounting and desperately need to clear problem accounts from their books before audits begin. This creates a narrow window where they're far more willing to cut deals than any other time of year. Done with Debt has cracked the code on this timing advantage. They know exactly which companies are most motivated to negotiate right now and use this insider knowledge to get results you can't achieve on your own. The best part, no bankruptcy, no new loans, no credit damage. In fact, most clients end up with more money in their pocket within the first month because they're no longer drowning in minimum payments. But the September window won't stay open forever. Once Q4 hits, lenders lighten up again and your leverage disappears. Get started now while you still have time. Go to donewithdebt.com and talk with one of their specialists for free. Visit donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt.com. 8 days after the murder of Charlie Kirk, it's time to get specific about what actions need to be taken in order to prevent any more conservatives from being hunted in this country. Now, it's true, as we discussed yesterday, that there are several indications that Charlie's killer did not act alone. And at the moment, the FBI says that it's looking into additional suspects, including the people who predicted that the shooting would occur several days in advance on social media. But even if a domestic LGBT terror cell is uncovered in this case, prosecuting them isn't going to be enough. It's a necessary step, but at the same time, it's nowhere near sufficient. If we want to ensure that conservatives have the right of free expression, we need to dismantle hundreds, if not thousands, of left-wing terror networks all across the country, as we've been saying all week. But, it's one thing to say something like that. It's one thing to rail against left-wing NGOs and trans activists over and over again until everybody gets bored and moves on and nothing is accomplished. To get anything done, of course, you need evidence of actual criminal activity. You need some kind of smoking gun. And despite what the Attorney General might claim, hate speech does not qualify as criminal activity. Mocking Charlie Kirk's death, as virtually everyone on the left is doing, is obviously reprehensible. It's disgusting. It's demonic. But in most cases, it's not illegal. What is illegal, on the other hand, is planning, funding, organizing, and otherwise abetting riots, harassment, property destruction, economic sabotage, murder, and so on. Those are the kinds of activities that, under RICO law, are actually very easy to prosecute. If an organization exists to repeatedly engage in criminal activity like this, the whole organization can be shut down and everybody involved can be hauled to prison. The president himself has invoked the RICO law recently in public appearances as a potential way to dismantle some of the left's biggest and most powerful institutions. And the other day, a researcher named Ryan Morrow with the Capital Research Center outlined exactly what those prosecutions could look like. He provided what appears to be a smoking gun, or at least the first of many, many smoking guns that will soon follow. It was a very important report that's worth highlighting because it moves beyond rhetoric and gets us much closer to actual tangible results. So here's part of that report. Quote, since 2016, George Soros' Open Society Foundation, OSF, now run with his son Alexander, has poured over $80 million into groups tied to terrorism or extremist violence. Open Society has spent millions of dollars into U.S.-based organizations that engage in direct action that the FBI defines as domestic terrorism. These groups include the Center for Third World Organizing and its militant partner Ruckus Society, which trained activists in property destruction and sabotage during the 2020 riots, and the Sunrise Movement, which endorsed the Antifa-linked Stop Cop City campaign, in which activists currently face over 40 domestic terrorism charges and 60 racketeering indictments. Open Society awarded $18 million to the Movement for Black Lives, a group that instructs activists in the use of false IDs, blockades, and economic disruption. Now, the report adds that According to Morrow's investigation, quote, Open Society rewarded at least $23 million to 7 groups that engage in or materially assist violence, property destruction, economic sabotage, harassment, and other criminality that meets the FBI's definition of domestic terrorism. Now, just to expound on one of those organizations, the Ruckus Society, as the name implies, reportedly suggests in their own training material that they encourage certain types of illegal activities. According to Influence Watch, these training materials instruct members on, quote, tactics to resist the unjust system. Some of these may be legal strategies, while others may be outside of the law, such as the use of civil disobedience. Now, to be very clear, under federal law, nonprofits are not allowed to engage in any form of partisan political activity, much less criminal activity. So we're potentially talking about tax crimes here in addition to everything else. There could be layers upon layers of criminal activity going on, and it happens so often that you probably don't even think about it or realize the extent of the problem. For example, you probably don't remember this scene from San Francisco last year. Rioters stormed the Golden Gate Bridge, and they blocked traffic, including ambulances, from going anywhere for hours. And guess what? It wasn't a random group of leftists who decided to do this. A woman named Ilhan Omar served as a spokeswoman for the rioters, and her day job, as it turns out, is serving as a communications director at a nonprofit called National Center for Lesbian Rights. So she takes tax-exempt money from the lesbian nonprofit, then stages a criminal takeover of a major bridge during work hours. And of course, the lesbian nonprofit had no problem with this because this is the entire purpose of left-wing nonprofits. For the most part, they're engineered to organize and fund lawlessness under the cover of law. Multiply this incident by about 1 million, and you begin to get a sense of the scale of the problem. There is a vast network of well-funded left-wing NGOs that, if you look below the surface and get past their mission statement and are intent, you see that they are intent on undermining and destroying the United States. If you're somebody who likes to find conspiracies, well, here it is. This is it. Here's another example, which Andy No reported over the summer. Michael Backus is a 46-year-old trans activist and prostitute from Houston who dresses like a girl. And according to No, the man, quote, has been standing outside the courthouse in downtown Portland recording people to try to intimidate witnesses who testify in the injunction hearing to enforce sound ordinances at the anti-ICE Antifa riots. Supposedly, he's often armed as well. Now, you can see what this looks like on your screen. We'll spare you some of the more unsettling photographs of this particular trans prostitute, but you can imagine. This is a deranged individual. This is a psychopath who's reportedly, there intimidating people near the courthouse to advance some kind of open borders agenda. And guess what? This person has apparently received financial support from yet another left-wing nonprofit. No reports that this prostitute has, quote, received thousands in grant money from a trans 501c3 for cosmetic surgery. Disturbingly, the Point of Pride nonprofit describes Backus's child prostitution past as if it was normal. Now, this kind of thing is very, very common, and it needs to be shut down immediately. Nonprofits should not be allowed to fund known criminals, much less known criminals who are engaging in acts of intimidation outside of federal courthouses. And even beyond that, nonprofits shouldn't be allowed to fund sex changes for mentally disturbed individuals who think that they're transgender. That's another problem we could put an end to overnight, and it's time to do so. Now, if you want to read Ryan Morrow's full report, and you should, it's on the website of the Capital Research Center. You can read more about how various organizations have received millions of dollars from entities connected to George Soros and then used that money to endorse Antifa coalitions that have, quote, engaged in arson, property damage, and violence against law enforcement and personnel and utility workers to try to stop construction of this local police training center. Attacks include setting a police vehicle ablaze, throwing Molotov cocktails, bricks and rocks at police, setting construction equipment on fire, blocking roads with obstacles like tires, harming police officers' eyes with lasers, and attacking the Atlanta Police Foundation's building with fireworks. And on and on. Dozens of charges, including domestic terrorism and racketeering, have been filed in these cases. The evidence is well established, and now it's time to act on it. This is a crackdown that should commence without any hint of hesitation whatsoever. It should be lawful but forceful. We have control of the federal government. We have the support of the majority of the American people, and we are morally justified. On our side, we don't celebrate cold-blooded murder. We don't glorify political assassinations. We don't deny the reality of biology or encourage the mutilation and sterilization of children. We have every conceivable mandate to dismantle these criminal enterprises. And we need to carry out that mandate using the full weight of the federal government. The momentum is ours. There are other indicators, as you may have seen, that we are winning this fight. Last night, for example, the left-wing activist Jimmy Kimmel was finally taken off the air. Here's what Kimmel said, in case you missed it. Watch.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, Kimmel was taken off the air just hours after the FCC chair, a man named Brendan Carr, gave an interview with Benny Johnson yesterday where he suggested that ABC, or more specifically ABC's affiliates, might be violating the terms of their broadcast licenses by airing Kimmel's show. Now, for background, it's been clear for many years that Kimmel was violating the terms of ABC's broadcast license. He was never performing any kind of comedy routine. He was simply delivering propaganda on behalf of the Democrat Party every single night, seemingly unconcerned with the fact that his ratings were plummeting year after year. In fact, on several occasions, he was caught working directly with Democrats in the Senate to distribute campaign materials. He celebrated the termination of conservatives, including Tucker Carlson. He celebrated when Donald Trump was banned from Twitter. He routinely embraced censorship and partisanship, and now he's finally gone, at least for the time being. Now, from a legal perspective, Kimmel's behavior was a problem because, as you may have noticed, not everybody gets the right to use the public airwaves in the way that ABC and their affiliates do. One of the requirements of holding a public broadcast license is that your content must advance the public interest in some way. Now, quoting from the FCC's website, in exchange for obtaining a valuable license to operate a broadcast station using the public airwaves, each radio and television licensee is required by law to operate its station in the public interest, convenience, and necessity. Generally, this means it must air programming that is responsive to the needs and problems of its local community of license. Now, flagrant lies about major public events, which are distributed solely for the benefit of one political party, are clearly not in the public interest. In fact, there are specific federal rules against disseminating false information using the public airwaves about crimes or catastrophes. Now, let's put that up on the screen again. This is direct from the FCC's website. These are the rules. They've been the rules well established for decades. Just because they've never been enforced against these left-wing networks doesn't mean they didn't exist. So as you can see, broadcast licensees cannot broadcast false information concerning a crime or catastrophe if the licensee knows the information is false and it's foreseeable that the false information will cause substantial public harm. And then the false information does actually cause substantial public harm. Now, you could debate whether Kimmel's lie caused public harm under the strict legal definition, but in general, there's no doubt that flagrant falsehoods like this, falsehoods that effectively endorse political assassinations by running cover for them, are extremely damaging to the country in every meaningful way. And they certainly aren't in the public interest. Now, Kimmel knew that it wasn't true that Kirk's assassin was a Trump supporter. He knew that it made no sense to suggest that. He knew he was defaming a Christian husband and father who had just been murdered in front of his family and in front of the entire world, but he lied anyway, like the disgusting scumbag that he is. And he thought there would be no consequences for doing so because he's been lying for more than a decade in pretty much the same way. And indeed, normally, conservatives would hear smug degenerates like Kimmel say stuff like this, and they just shrug it off. Meanwhile, the left would destroy conservatives' livelihoods for infractions that weren't half as egregious. Conservatives wouldn't start a campaign to cancel Jimmy Kimmel's show. They certainly wouldn't call on the federal government to do anything. That was the state of play, right up until the moment that Charlie was murdered. And that is not the state of play anymore. First of all, immediately after Kimmel's comments, conservatives on X with large followings, including people like Aaron McIntyre at The Blaze, began telling their followers to bombard all of Kimmel's advertisers, as well as Disney and ABC executives, with complaints. And there was a massive response. Huge numbers of people were doing that. Then on top of that, here's what FCC Chair Brendan Carr said in an interview with Benny Johnson yesterday, quote, "We could do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct and take actions on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead." This is the approach that, along with activism by conservatives on social media, presumably sent ABC executives into a panic, along with the executives at Sinclair and Nexstar, which own the affiliates that broadcast ABC's content. But it's not actually clear that Brendan Carr was the tipping point here. There's evidence that these affiliates, especially after seeing the backlash, were simply tired of Kimmel's act, outraged by what he said, or probably more specifically, were worried about the audience backlash. In fact, Sinclair is now demanding that Kimmel apologize to Kirk's family and make a donation to Turning Point. Meanwhile, they're going to broadcast a tribute to Charlie Kirk in Kimmel's usual time slot. In other words, there's no reason to think that the government or the FCC had anything to do with Kimmel's suspension. The response from conservatives was probably enough. In any event, the upshot is that, at least for now, Kimmel won't be able to lie to his 15 viewers anymore or implicitly encourage them to commit political assassinations. And in response, the best defense that the left can offer isn't particularly convincing. Watch.
Let's back up and look at what Kimmel actually said on the program that has caused controversy. This is from Monday night in his Monday evening monologue. Kimmel suggested that the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk might have been a pro-Trump Republican. He said, quote, "The MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it." He said in between the finger pointing, there was grieving. Kimmel was expressing what we've heard some other liberals say in recent days, that the motives are unclear and that maybe the suspect in this case was a Republican or was some sort of far-right fringe figure. Of course, there has been a lot of discussion about that in recent days. There's a lot of evidence pointing in other directions about the suspect. But Kimmel was on the air talking about this, making a very serious commentary amid his jokes in his monologue Monday night.
Again, it's another lie. That's all they can do. First of all, Kimmel didn't suggest anything. He said it. He flat out said that the shooter was a MAGA Republican. And contrary to what Brian Stelter is saying, there's no basis at all for saying that the shooter might have been a Republican. Every single piece of evidence contradicts that claim, starting with the fact that he shot one of the most prominent Republicans in the entire country. And also he wrote that Charlie was a fascist on the bullets. He fell into left-wing politics, according to his own family. He had a gay, furry, transgender roommate. Okay, all of these things are evidence that that obviously he was not a Republican. Any attempt to suggest that this was a Republican shooter, including the claim that Stelter just made, is a grotesque lie. And it's a lie that does have legal implications, given that ABC relies on broadcast licenses. But the lies kept coming on CNN. Here's what Van Jones had to say.
That is why we exist. Not to knuckle under, not to do what we're told, but to stand up and to say, listen, if you want to pull these licenses, then we're going to go to court, and we'll be in the court of public opinion. But you don't get to go on a podcast and set policy for American media, for an American media institution that's been around a lot longer than me, you, or Donald Trump. This is a red line that has been crossed for our industry. For the First Amendment, for the right of people to speak. There was nothing hateful about what was said, and even hateful speech is protected. This is not acceptable. If you are going to run a media organization, it's called a news organization, you have to stand up to government bullying anywhere in the world, and certainly in the United States.
Well, the job should be to speak truth to power, even when there are people who don't like the word truth anymore.
Well, he's wrong, by the way, that the speech wasn't hateful. I mean, it clearly was. It was very obviously an attempt to malign Charlie Kirk's movement and every one of his supporters. But that's not the biggest problem with what Van Jones said. He's acting as though the FCC has just violated the First Amendment simply because the FCC chair mentioned on a podcast that they were considering the possibility of, taking a look at this and seeing if there was lawful action to take against ABC and its affiliates. I mean, that's the most that was done at the governmental level, was talking about something on a podcast. But of course, in his answer, Jones doesn't say a word about broadcast licenses or ABC's obligations under the law. He doesn't acknowledge the very significant distinction between an organization like CNN, which is a cable network, and a network like ABC, which is broadcast over public airwaves. Nor does he address the statement from Sinclair, which was obviously appalled by what Kimmel had said, all on their own. Nexstar had a similar statement. But even if we assume the FCC was the deciding factor, even though it probably wasn't, the key point is that Jimmy Kimmel and these ABC affiliates do not have a constitutional right to use the public airwaves to disseminate malicious propaganda on behalf of a political party. I'm sorry, but they just don't. The use of those airwaves is a privilege, and there's a mountain of evidence, up to and including Kimmel's statements about Charlie Kirk, that ABC does not deserve to have that privilege. I know we're so used to the fact that that networks like ABC have been able to use the public airwaves and maintain their broadcast licenses while every single day for years and years and years, violating the rules of the license and disseminating propaganda, lying to their audiences. Like, we're used to that. But that doesn't mean that it was ever actually legal to do. And there are a lot of things that up until this moment, conservatives have just said, okay, yeah, well, probably, they shouldn't be doing that. Really, they aren't supposed to do it. They can't do it. But they're doing it anyway. And, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Take their license away? That was kind of the conservative attitude up until this moment. And now the attitude is, well, yeah, we'll take their license away. Why shouldn't we? You violated the rules. We're going to hold you to it. What argument do you have besides crying about it? Go ahead and cry. We don't care. In fact, we revel in your tears. We revel in them. Now, admittedly, at this point, we are in unfamiliar territory as conservatives. We're not used to the idea of utilizing the power of the federal government in a way that that inflicts any kind of meaningful consequences on our political opponents, or even that suggests consequences might be possible in order to improve this country and restore civil liberties to all Americans. We've seen how Democrats use the power of the federal government maliciously and unlawfully. And so we have a natural aversion to the idea of doing anything that may appear remotely similar. But not all federal crackdowns amount to lawfare. Not every aggressive action by the DOJ or the FCC is unconstitutional. We actually don't have an obligation to pretend that every Soros-funded nonprofit is untouchable or that every corporate media outlet deserves to have a broadcast license. We can believe in the First Amendment while also punishing unlawful conduct that's masquerading as legitimate. Every conservative must understand this. As long as we are very judicious about how we proceed, as long as we don't devolve into a Fannie Willis-style circus or go around policing hate speech, then we have the opportunity to bring about some of the most significant improvements to American civic life in generations. We can prevent rioters from terrorizing entire cities because BLM has selected a new martyr, or because ICE officers are arresting illegal aliens in a particular city. We can shut down militant trans NGOs, preventing young people from receiving money to mutilate their bodies or commit acts of terrorism. We can end the practice of strangely well-funded and well-equipped protesters popping up at a moment's notice to harass law enforcement or witnesses in federal trials or shut down traffic on the highway. We can and should do all of those things. The job of the federal government is to ensure that every citizen in this country can enjoy their civil liberties. And a big part of that responsibility is to ensure that criminal enterprises are not operating within our borders, plotting acts of terrorism that will silence conservative expression. Again, the president seems to understand that. Last night, for example, he declared that Antifa is a major domestic terrorist organization. And while the left will complain about that designation, no reasonable person can really dispute it. Everyone can see now that the left supports political assassinations. They openly endorse political violence without any reservation. They revel in it. And there's strong evidence that some of the most powerful groups on the left are funding this violence. These criminals have operated with impunity for far too long. Like Jimmy Kimmel, they've never contemplated the possibility of facing any consequences for their actions. Never contemplated the idea that any rule would ever be enforced against them. Now, after what they've done to Charlie, those consequences, which will be as ruthless as they are righteous, are finally upon them. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. You guys ever read protein bar labels and feel like you're reading off a candy bar? Most protein bars are loaded with sugar and processed junk food that leave you bloated and unsatisfied. Well, my team was hunting for something better, a clean protein bar that actually keeps us energized. Now enter Equip Foods Prime Bar, the first grass-fed beef protein bar made with only real food ingredients and absolutely nothing to hide. Starting today, my listeners will receive an exclusive discount on Prime Bar, which has become our team's favorite protein bar on the market, with 20 grams of protein in every bar. I've tried a lot of protein bars on the market, and none of them taste like real food. They taste artificial and strange, but Prime Bar actually tastes like real food. And it's good, with just 11 clean ingredients, including collagen, beef tallow, and colostrum, naturally sweetened with dates and honey. You get 20 grams of clean protein without the bloat. No whey, seed oils, gluten, or artificial junk. They're third-party tested for heavy metals, microplastics, and pesticides, so they can actually back up their cleanest bars on the market claim. If you want to try the cleanest protein bar on the market that already sold out once, go to equipfoods.com/Matt Walsh and use code Matt Walsh at checkout to get 25% off one-time purchases or 40% off your first subscription order for a limited time. That's equipfoods.com/Matt Walsh and use code Matt Walsh at checkout. For over a week, we paused advertisements and any appeals for Daily Wire memberships to focus on the only thing that truly mattered in the moment, remembering and honoring the legacy of Charlie Kirk. And yet, even without being asked, you showed up for us, watching, commenting, sharing, and supporting us by becoming Daily Wire members. You reminded us once again that we're not alone in the fight for freedom, that we will not be silenced, and that together we will keep building the future. Thank you for standing with us. You are what makes America great and inspires us to continue the work we do every day. I have talked about the necessity for conservatives to band together and put their squabbles and grudges aside. And so I want to lead by example here by coming to the defense of Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Now, as you know, I have not exactly been a Nancy Mace fan in recent months. I've been pretty hard on her, actually, very critical. But the olive branch that I've extended goes to everybody on the right. Everybody on the right, across the spectrum. Because that's what I truly believe the moment calls for. That's what I truly believe. And now, if anyone on the right, and as we've already seen, there are some on the right who have declined, who have said, no, thank you. I don't want to be united with you. I want to keep, picking you apart and defaming and slandering you. There are some other, in fact, there are some, ostensibly conservative accounts on X right now that over the last couple of days have been frantically claiming that I am using Nazi rhetoric now. Well, we'll get back to Nancy Mace in a second here, but now I'm going off on a tangent, but because I've extended this olive branch, I've said, anyone on the right. Okay. And there are some of these accounts on X that have said that it's a Nazi rhetoric because, and I'm not, and you're going to think that I'm exaggerating when I say this, but what is the Nazi rhetoric that I've used? Well, the Nazi rhetoric, according to these ostensibly some conservative accounts, is that I have talked about friends and enemies. So I've made a distinction between friends and enemies. And according to my critics, that is Nazi language. That's really what they're claiming. I'm not making a straw man. That's really what they're saying. In fact, when we were on, we had the great honor of being guests on the Charlie Kirk show a couple of days ago. And it was this one clip where I made the same point on the show that, it's very easy for me to see the distinction between friends and enemies. It's always been pretty easy for me to see. But now over the last week, that distinction could not be more stark. And the distinction is that, as I said on Charlie's show, that I know that if I'm killed, nobody on the right will celebrate it. They will all mourn it. And even the people on the right that I have had serious differences with, even the people that have criticized me relentlessly, as some of them have done for years and years, if I were to walk outside right now and get shot and killed, none of those people would celebrate that fact. They would all mourn it. And I believe that they would genuinely mourn it. Just as I would for them. However, on the left, if I walk outside and get shot, we all know it's unanimous celebration. Like there's no, it's nearly unanimous, like 95% agreement there will be that it's a good thing that I was killed. So So it's easy for me to see. Like, the people that I know for a fact would celebrate my death, they are my enemies. If that doesn't make you my enemy, then the word enemy doesn't mean anything. And so it was that point that I've made a few times, I made on Charlie's show, that that I was told by some supposed conservatives is Nazi language. Because did you know that Nazis invented the distinction between friends and enemies? Before the Nazis came along, everyone was friends. Did you know that? Yeah, you gotta really study world history, or because you could miss that. That's a fact you could miss. There are a lot of things in world history that you could misinterpret. When you read the history of the world and you see just nothing but war and violence and conflict, you might see that and think that, oh wow, well they had friends and enemies. There's always been friends and enemies in human civilization. But no, everybody was friends until the Nazis came along and they invented the enemies, and so then all of a sudden there was a distinction between friends and enemies. So that's what some conservatives. So they have not only have they declined my olive branch that I've extended, but they've even said that in my extending of the olive branch, I'm revealing that I'm a Nazi. So, and that's fine. If anyone who says we don't want to be united with you, then that's fine. But as I said, you've made yourself irrelevant. You were already probably irrelevant, but you've made yourself even more so as we move forward. Because there's a real battle between good and evil right now, between light and darkness. And you want to sit on the sidelines and nitpick. That's Nazi language. That's not even nitpicking. That's just flagrantly making things up. You want to do that, which is just so you're opting out of the battle. You want to be totally useless, and that's fine. But back to Nancy Mace. Now, granted, she is a politician, so I reserve the right to criticize when necessary. But the focus right now should be coming together against the left who wants us dead. So with that said, here is Nancy Mace. Listen.
Here I am standing outside of the anti-American Ilhan Omar's office. Tomorrow we will file a privileged motion to censure her and to strip her of her committee assignments. She is inciting violence against conservatives in the wake of Charlie Kirk's political assassination. She is dehumanizing conservatives all across the country, calling Charlie Kirk a terrorist. We have been villainized and dehumanized far too long. The Democrats set the standard for stripping people of their committee assignments. I'm not going to be silent on this because enough is enough. I'm tired of your performative BS that is putting lives in danger. You can take your Sharia-loving, anti-American self back to Somalia.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So Nancy Mace is filing a motion to censure Ilhan Omar. She says Omar should take her ass back to Somalia. She's right about that. Here's more from the Daily Mail. Representative Nancy Mace is working to punish progressive squad member Ilhan Omar for the Democrats' vile comments about Charlie Kirk's assassination. A day after the 31-year-old father of two was killed while speaking in front of 3,000 people, Omar ripped into Turning Point USA co-founder's legacy. Omar told Zeteo last Thursday, there are a lot of people who are talking about him, that is Kirk, just wanting to have a civil debate. These people are full of and it's important for us to call them out while we feel anger and sadness. And later, the Minnesota Democrat reposted a video that claimed Kirk was a reprehensible human being and a terrorist. Omar, though, claims that Mace's gambit will fail. She posted, fun fact, Nancy Mace is trying to censure me over comments I never said. Her resolution does not contain a single quote from me because she couldn't find any. Unlike her, I have routinely condemned political violence, no matter the ideology. This is all an act to push a false story so she can fundraise and boost her run for governor. So Ilhan Omar is, of course, lying. She's hiding behind the fact that she was retweeting people saying vile things about Charlie rather than saying them herself. But there's no difference there. She retweeted a video of somebody calling Charlie a terrorist, And she did that mere hours after his death. Now, when somebody is murdered and you call them a terrorist, are you justifying their murder? Yes, obviously you are. Terrorists, actual terrorists, deserve to be killed. That's what we do with terrorists, right? It's not controversial. We kill terrorists. They should be killed legally. They should, either on the field of battle or arrested, convicted, and executed. But yeah, that's when you call someone a terrorist, you are justifying them being killed. And when you call them a terrorist right after they've been killed, you're justifying it. And it's even worse with Ilhan because she's too chicken to come out and just say it herself. So she posts other people saying it and then plays dumb. She deserves to be censured, deserves to lose her committee assignments. She deserves more than that. I mean, I said a few days ago, I think she deserved to be denaturalized and deported. She lied in her documentation when she became a citizen. She has no loyalty to this country. She lied. She became a citizen under false pretenses. And so, yeah, she should be denaturalized and kicked out of the country. And I shouldn't need to explain this either, but just for the record, this is not a free speech issue. Ilhan is a public official. She's a member of Congress. There are certain standards we expect people in her position to live up to. You have certain responsibilities. Ilhan is not living up to those responsibilities. She deserves to be punished for it. So, well done, Nancy Mace. Post Millennial reports a heated exchange at a Dearborn City Council meeting last week has sparked controversy after Mayor Abdullah Hammoud told a Christian resident he was not welcome in the city for objecting to new street signs honoring an Arab news publisher that has supported terrorism. Edward Ted Barham, who identified himself as a longtime Dearborn resident, voiced concerns during the public comment period about Wayne County's decision to name 2 intersections on Warren Avenue after publisher Osama Siblani. He's a promoter of Hezbollah and Hamas, Barham said. He talks about how the blood of martyrs irrigates the land of Palestine. Others will fight with planes, drones, and rockets. Barham compared the honor to naming a road Hezbollah Street or Hamas Street. Several council members interjected. And then we have the comments from the mayor. In fact, we have a video here, so we'll go ahead and play the video. So this is that's the setup. That's what this guy was objecting to. And the mayor, what's this guy's name again? Mayor Abdullah Hammoud had this to say in response. Listen.
Hezbollah, bombed the embassy in Beirut, and including many Americans. So I just feel it's quite inappropriate.
You are an Islamophobe, and although you live here, I want you to know, as mayor, you are not welcome here. And the day you move out of the city will be the day that I launch a parade celebrating the fact that you moved out of the city, because you are not somebody who believes in coexistence.
Now, this is why I have no remorse for the way that I talk about these foreigners who come here and hate our country and our people and subvert our culture for their own ends. I have no remorse, no compunction about it, because this is how they talk about us and to us. Just imagine the nerve it takes, the nerve, to be a guy named Abdullah H. Hammoud and to tell someone else, a guy named Ted, that he's not welcome here. And listen to what he says. He says, although you live here, you aren't welcome here. Oh, well, that's funny, Abdullah, because I feel exactly the same about you. Yeah, you live here in America, but you're not welcome here. And you're not really an American. And once we ship all the foreign subverters out of this country, the people who hate this country, hate our traditions, hate our culture, once you're all gone, I too will throw a parade. We will all throw a parade. So the feeling is mutual, Abdullah. What's happening in Dearborn and so many other places, Minneapolis, many places, is a perfect illustration of the problem with mass migration. The foreigners are obviously not attempting to assimilate into American culture. The assimilation ruse was dropped a long time ago. We know that. But they also aren't merely trying to set up their own enclaves, their own little foreign bubbles in our country. That's bad enough. But what they're actually doing is this. They're doing what you see here. They are attempting to force America to assimilate to them. That's what's happening. So I think we should all, myself included, we should be more precise in how we speak about this issue, because we say that, oh, assimilation isn't happening. I just said it a second ago. But it's worse than that. No, what's actually happening is that these people will not assimilate to us. What they want is for us to assimilate to them. And assimilate to them, not just in tolerating them coming here and setting up their own enclaves, but actually, it's our obligation. So when a foreigner from an Arab country comes here, they're going to work to turn our country, our land, in Arab. And so it's our obligation to get with that program. That's their attitude. And so they're going to start renaming the streets and the cities after their Arab heroes. And if you have an issue with it, you aren't welcome. You aren't welcome in your own country, in your own land. Just the gall to say that. For Mayor Abdullah to say that to Ted in America, you're not welcome here. Who do you think you are, Abdullah? This is how you end up with a mayor named Abdullah, who condemns a citizen of his own town, an American citizen, says he isn't welcome in his own land. He isn't welcome. This is a takeover. This is a hostile takeover. Couldn't be any more clear. These people come here and they say, okay, now all of you in America, you people who welcomed us, who allowed us to come, who were generous to us, now you must do as we say. You have to get with our program. We can't tolerate this. We cannot tolerate it. Can't put up with it. It's too much. Too far. Gone way, way, way too far. And they will use this kind of language, and yet you'll still have Americans who tell us that for us to use that sort of language in return is, not welcoming enough, racist, xenophobic. Well, I don't care what you call it. You can call it xenophobic all you want. People like this are not welcome here. You're not welcome here. We'll move to this. The New College of Florida put out this tweet. The tweet says, today we announced that we will commission a statue of Charlie Kirk to honor his legacy and incredible work after his tragic assassination last week. The statue, privately funded by community leaders, will stand on campus as a commitment by New College to defend and fight for free speech and civil discourse in American life. Location for the statue will be announced in the coming months. You can see the statue there, or the mock-up of the statue. It's a great idea. Now, I will say this: if you're going to put up a statue of Charlie, you better have security around it and cameras rolling at all times, security cameras. You better be prepared to arrest and prosecute anyone who vandalizes it. You better be ready to bring the hammer down on the first leftist who comes and tries to spray paint it or tear it down, because that'll happen in about 30 seconds. And you got to bring that hammer down and bring it down hard, like prison time. Throw every single possible, throw the entire, everything in the book you can find to throw at that person. Throw it at them. First student that comes along, okay, you're expelled and we're going to send you to prison. Congratulations, you just ruined your whole life. All I did was spray paint a statue. Yeah, okay, but your life is ruined. Sorry. And now you're an example for the next person who comes along and thinks that it's your place to do that because you don't like. I mean, look, it's all about, a lot of what we're dealing with right now is, I always bring it back to parenting. And these leftists, because in a lot of ways they had bad parents, or they didn't have parents at all. They have not been parented, or they've been parented poorly. They act like children. And so there's a lot of, lessons you can draw just from an experience as a parent. So these leftists they've developed really bad habits. And they need to be broken of those habits. And one of the many bad habits that they've developed is that because they've been allowed to, they've developed this habit of thinking that if they see a statue or a monument they don't like, they can just tear it down. Because this, as a parent, if you put up with bad behavior and you make it, and you do that, and you're going to get a lot more of it. Once the child realizes that he can get away with whatever the bad behavior is, he's going to keep doing it. And so it's insane, but we tolerated this for years. I mean, everyone remembers it. We lived through it. There was years where the left, they see a statue and they're like, I don't like that one. I'm just going to take it down. Like, what? How? You can't just do that. You don't like a public monument? You can just tear it down? But they could just do it. We allowed it. Didn't have to allow it. I mean, you tear down a statue, there's like dozens of laws that you're breaking. All at once. So this is one of the many bad habits that they need to be broken of. And one of the ways that you do that is by setting an example. You come down hard, you set an example. And I suspect that this statue, when it goes up, will be a good place to start. But this is also what we need to do. We can't just oppose the left. We can't just fight against whatever they're trying to do because that's what the left does. They only oppose. They only try to tear down. They have no positive vision, right? They destroy, they tear down statues, but then they put nothing in its place. They have no heroes, really. Now, sure, you might say, well, they have George Floyd. They have BLM martyrs. Right, well, that's exactly the point. George Floyd is not a hero. He never did anything heroic. He never contributed a single positive thing to the world or to his community. He was a predator. It's the stark difference between Charlie Kirk and George Floyd. I mean, it's an endless list of differences. But you notice when people are mourning Charlie, his friends, family, wife, children, and then even people who didn't know him, they're not just talking about how he died. They're talking about what he did in his life. They're remembering the wonderful things that he did and achieved and the positive impact that he had on them. When the left was mourning George Floyd, there was none of that. Even his own family, like they couldn't come up with anything good the guy ever did. Endless eulogies to George Floyd. We never heard one thing. Like, what did this guy ever do? His own family, they couldn't give one example. Like, give me what? Did he ever do anything good? Did he loan someone $5 at some point? I mean, did he do anything ever good for anyone at any point in his life? And the answer is no. He never did anything good for anybody because he was a horrible person and a violent predator. He invaded a woman's house and robbed her at gunpoint. I mean, this is the kind of person he was. It's like the worst kind of person you can be. So he was not a hero. They turned him into a symbol simply because of the manner of his death. And that's all they have. They have no real heroes. So we as conservatives, we have to have a positive vision and we have to assert that vision. And part of that is having heroes that we celebrate. Having cultural heroes is it's a very important part of having a culture, of being a culture. Having people, great men that we look up to. And that's why it's important to build statues and name streets and cities after our heroes. It's very important. It's an essential part of having a national identity, a part of building and maintaining a culture. So yes, let's build the Charlie Kirk statues, have Charlie Kirk schools and streets. He's a true hero. Not just because of how he died, not just because he's a symbol because of how he died, but because of how he lived. And we should celebrate him as such. And this should be part of a larger campaign to start celebrating our cultural heroes again. I've said many times that we should start erecting 100-foot statues of Columbus everywhere. it's not enough to just stop the left from vandalizing and tearing down the statues. We have to build these monuments again. Columbus, one of the greatest men in the history of the world, one of the great men of Western civilization. And there's many, many other examples. We have to celebrate our heroes, celebrate our traditions, and I think this is a good place to start. I want to close this show with a very brief thought. I spoke at an event for the organization Do No Harm last night. It was the first speech I've given since Charlie's death. Fitting that I think that my first speech would be at a Do No Harm event, given that they fight against gender ideology, and so did Charlie. And of course, he was killed by a militant for that ideology. I'd like to reiterate something that I said during that speech because it's been on my mind quite a bit. And I think that it's worth saying to a larger audience here on the show. So that's what I will do. A couple of days ago, someone asked me a question that I've been thinking about ever since. And the question was this: do I think that Charlie thought that it was worth it in the end? In his dying moments, if he was able to think anything at all, if he was able to form any thoughts before he passed, did he think that it was worth it? Was it worth fighting for truth given the price he had to pay for it? If all he had worked for had led him to this moment, death, pain, was it worth it? Would he take it all back if he had known the cost, if he had known that it would cost him literally everything? And this is a question that resonates deeply because it has personal implications for all of us. When I say that we're under attack, that they want us dead, that all of this is probably going to get worse before it gets better, I really mean it. I don't say it for effect or to be dramatic or to generate a viral clip or whatever. I say it because I believe it to be true, which means that I have to ask myself. We all have to ask ourselves, is it worth it? What if you meet the same fate as Charlie? I mean, really think about it. What if you do? If you have the chance to think anything before the lights go out, will you think that it was worth it? Or will you wish that you had just kept your mouth shut, that you had stayed out of it, that you hadn't put yourself out there? What did Charlie think about that? Well, I don't know what Charlie thought, obviously. I mean, there are a lot of people speaking for Charlie, putting words in his mouth, telling us what he thought or would have thought about this or that. I don't want to do that. Because the truth is, I don't know what goes through a man's mind when he's in his final moments. I literally cannot imagine it. When he's lying in a pool of his own blood and all he can hear is the chaos and the screaming and the shrieks of horror all around him. When he's confronted suddenly and violently with the reality that he will never see his wife and children again in this life. I don't know what kind of thoughts you think, if any. But if I had to guess, based on what I know about Charlie, did he think it was worth it? Yes. Yes, I really do. And what I can say for sure, without making any assumptions about Charlie's state of mind, is that it was worth it. Charlie died because he stood for the truth. Let's make no mistake about that. That's why he was killed. He was killed because he spoke the truth. And the truth is worth any cost that we must pay for it. The truth is worth our lives. It's worth our blood. It's worth even the grief and tears of our loved ones. Because the truth is the only thing that's worth anything. And the truth always wins in the end. The truth always prevails. I mean, you can hide from it. You can lie about it. You can try to distract from it. You can attempt to confuse and change the subject. You can cajole and harass and threaten those who speak it. You can kill them, but you can't kill the truth. The truth will outlive all of us. It was here before us. It'll be here after us. When we're all dead and gone and our graves are forgotten and overgrown, the truth will still be the truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ is the truth. The truth is Christ. The truth is eternal. There's nothing more important than it. It's more important than any of our lives. And the truth is what Charlie dedicated his life to. So yes, the truth is worth dying for because it's worth living for. And Charlie never forgot that. And neither should we. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
ABC ends Jimmy Kimmel's show for lying about Charlie Kirk. President Trump designates Antifa as a terrorist organization, and the Muslim mayor of Dearborn demands that residents support Hezbollah. Check it out on The Michael Knowles Show.